So is the foil boat method the secret to brisket brilliance? Stick around and let's find out. I am the Dawgfatha and welcome back to Barbecue Boulevard. Now, today we're looking at the foil boat method for brisket. Now, there's tons of different ways to cook briskets and to wrap briskets and that sort of thing, but the foil boat method, people often say that the metric to grade a great brisket may be the bark on it. That's a bunch of B's to throw in there at the top of this video. But anyway, there's different ways that you can achieve bark, but the knock on wrapping the briskets later in the cook is that it sometimes destroys the bark that we've spent so much time building on. Now, the foil boat method is a little different because you actually leave the fat cap exposed to your ambient heat throughout your entire cook. Therefore, you're not wrapping that part of the brisket, and therefore it gives you a more firm and crunchy bark. But is this method mind-blowing? That's what we're gonna look at. Okay, so for today's cook, we got us a select cut brisket from our HEB. I know it's not prime or Wagyu, but that's fine. I decide which brisket I'm gonna get based on what I'm gonna do at the end of the cook. Am I making slices that's gonna be meant to impress people, or am I just doing sandwiches? If I'm doing sandwiches, which is what we're gonna do with this one, I may go with a less expensive brisket. So therefore, a select cut is perfect for what we're gonna do today. Okay, so as I said, we got this select cut brisket into the studio and we got it onto our cutting board where we trimmed it up. Now, we're not gonna go crazy with this trimming job today, and I'm not going to go extensively into how I trim my briskets. I've got a video out there that I'll link right up there. But if you guys want to see me do another trimming video, then pop that down there in the comments below and we'll see if we can make that happen for you. Now, part of my trimming process is to figure out the size that I want that brisket to be when we're gonna get it on the grill. Now, it really depends on what grill I'm gonna use. If I'm gonna use an offset or a bigger pellet smoker, say, I may not trim a whole lot off of it, but let's just say we're putting it on a kettle grill or something that may be smaller where we're challenged for space. I may get a little bit more aggressive with that trim, but today we're just gonna do a basic trim here. We'll knock down a little bit of it and we're gonna get it onto our grill. Now, the seasoning of choice, there's tons of seasonings out there you can use, but today we're gonna be using the Goldie's brisket rub. Now, if you're not familiar with Goldie's, Goldie's was voted the #1 barbecue destination in Texas Monthly's top 50. I've used this rub before and it's a fantastic commercial rub that you can buy if you're not gonna make your own rub. And that's what we're gonna use today. It's got some great color to it and it's got some great flavors to it. And I highly recommend it if you're looking for a commercial rub that you wanna purchase. Now, all we're gonna do is we're gonna just generously coat this brisket. Now, we're gonna coat the top, the sides, the bottom. We're gonna get this brisket thoroughly seasoned, but evenly seasoned as well. And that's what we're gonna do before we get the brisket onto the grill today. Okay, now that we've got this brisket thoroughly trimmed the way we want, we've got it thoroughly seasoned with our Goldie's brisket rub, it's time for us to get it ready to go on the grill. Now, we're gonna let this brisket rest for about 20-30 minutes while we get our grill prep. Now, today we're gonna be using the Spider Grill's Huntsman. This is a fantastic kettle motto. Get it? Half kettle, half Kamado. It's a fantastic grill to use. It's got the venom attached to it that you can program your temperatures. And I've got other things to do while we're doing this cook, so I'm gonna be able to load this onto this grill and I'm gonna let it just do what it does all day while I do what I do. So we've got the Spider Grill's Huntsman. We're gonna load it up with Harder Charcoal Lump. If you guys aren't familiar with the Harder Charcoal brand, you've got to check it out. I'll put a link down in the description box so that you can go check out Harder Charcoal, and maybe you can get your hands on some Harder Charcoal Lump or even the briquettes. They make a fantastic product. It burns long and hot and not a lot of ash, so I love this charcoal. But we've got this lump charcoal loaded into our Huntsman, and then we're gonna get it fired up. Now we're just gonna use the propane torch, just the Sear Pro, to light a little bit, and we're gonna be using kind of a minion method. Now I've got all my charcoal banked to one side of the grill, and we're just gonna light one side of it. And so once we light that one side, the idea is that the heat is gonna come across these coals. It's gonna fire across the coals, and the more coals you have in there, hopefully the longer burn you're gonna get. But as efficient as the Huntsman is, I don't have a problem with how long it's gonna run, because this is gonna be a really good cook and a very long cook, and this charcoal can handle it. Okay, so now that we've got our charcoal lit, we got some post oak wood chunks that we're gonna be putting in. Now, if you guys have been rocking with me, you know I love the post oak flavor, so therefore that's what I'm going to be using. We're going to put a couple of good post oak chunks in here, and I'm also going to put a foil pan under where I'm going to have my brisket. Now the foil pan, I'm not putting water or anything into it. I don't believe that I need to moisturize my environment in there. It's literally just going to catch the juices from this brisket, and it helps to make for a lot faster and easier cleanup at the end of this cook. And now that we've got this all assembled, we're just gonna go ahead and get our brisket put on. Now we're making sure we're doing the offset method. So we've got our coals on one side, we've got our brisket on the other, and star of the show is on. So we've got this brisket onto our Spider Grill's Huntsman, and we're setting up our venom for the first part of this cook. Now we're gonna do a cold smoke. I know, cold smoke. It's not really a cold smoke because we're not under 100 degrees, but we're going to be smoking the first part of this at a lower temperature. So we're going to set our Spider Grill's venom at 200 degrees Fahrenheit. And we're going to run this until we get to the color we're looking for and our rub is set on this brisket. So I'm anticipating we're probably not going to take a look at this brisket again for the next 6 to 8 hours. Now guys, as I said, we're going to be making brisket sandwiches with this brisket today. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make some pickled onions and some jalapenos. Goes fantastic with brisket sandwiches. That vinegar from the pickling will just cut right through the richness of brisket, so it works very well. And it's a very simple process to do this. Now, a good general rule of thumb for when you're making a solution for pickling is 50-50. That's 50% gonna be vinegar, 50% gonna be water, or 1-to-1. Now, if you want your pickles to be a little bit more tangy, then you can raise up the ratio of vinegar to water. In my particular case, I settle somewhere around 75-25. That's 75% vinegar to 25% water. Now, again, play with it and figure out what's the right ratio for you, and it'll work out just fine. Now, we've got our onions thinly sliced, and we've got some jalapeno slices into a container, and we're just gonna top it with about 1.5 tablespoons of salt. After I've got that in there, we're gonna cover it with our solution of vinegar and water. We're gonna go ahead and seal it up, and it's gonna go in the refrigerator until we're ready to use it. Okay, so now we're at the 6-hour mark. That's right, our brisket has been rolling at 200 degrees Fahrenheit on our Spider Grill's Huntsman for 6 hours since we've last seen it. And all we're gonna do is we're just looking at it to see what the color is looking like, seeing if our bark is set, seeing just how it feels. Is it is it cooking dry? Is it too moist? We're just gonna do a checkpoint. We're just gonna check everything out, see how everything is progressing, make any adjustments if we need to, and we're gonna keep it rolling. Now the brisket is looking fantastic. It's not quite where I want the color to be, so we are definitely gonna let it keep rolling, but we're just gonna regather our coals. The coals were looking fine, but they're kind of spread out a little bit, so we're just gonna move them all to one side and keep them all contained so that they can have a good even heat and not have to maybe struggle going across the coals that got spread out. Also, a thing to note on that checkpoint is I checked the temperature, and the temperature of that brisket is somewhere between 150 and 160 degrees, and that's perfect for what we're doing with this cook. Now again, I'm not one to really go by temperatures whenever I'm cooking a brisket, for a long cook, but I know a lot of you like to know this information, and so therefore that's why we're checking it. So we're roughly 150, 160 degrees at the 6-hour checkpoint. We're gonna close it back up and we're gonna keep rolling. All right, so now we are at the 9-hour mark. That's right. We've been going 9 hours now at 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and our brisket is roughly between 175 and 180 degrees internal temperature now. More importantly, we've got the color that I'm looking for. Our rub is set the way we want it, and so we know that we can move on to the next part of the cook. And that next part is going to be actually cooking. We just smoked it for these 9 hours, and now we're going to actually cook the cooking process where we tenderize our brisket. And that, my friends, is where the foil boat is going to come into play here. So we've got a couple of sheets of heavy duty aluminum foil. I've got them crisscrossed on my table. Now we put down about a cup or so of beef tallow onto our foil, and we got our brisket onto it. Now, once we put the brisket onto this foil, we're just basically crimping it up inwards towards the brisket all the way around, creating a boat. That's right. Hey, foil boat method, it's that simple and straightforward. Now we got this boat created around our brisket, and we're using it to basically protect the meat side of our brisket and not let it get overcooked. And so we're just leaving the fat cap exposed to our ambient temperatures inside our grill. We've got it all nice and snug. We got that tallow down in there in the bottom. And hey, all we got to do is put it back on the grill. Now at this point, as I said, this is the part where you're actually going to cook your brisket or tenderize it. And so therefore, we're not going to keep rolling at 200 degrees because that'll take us forever. We're going to go ahead and kick it up. So at this point, we're raising our temperature to 275 degrees Fahrenheit. Now again, if you like to cook at a lower temperature or a hotter temperature, it's absolutely fine. There's no rules in barbecue. Do what works for you. For me, 275 degrees Fahrenheit is a great temperature for cooking the brisket, so that's why I chose that temperature. And that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna let it keep going. Okay, so now we've had the foil boat going with our brisket for a couple of hours, and now we're at the 11-hour mark. That's right, 11 hours into this cook. Now we've got our grill open and we're checking our brisket to see if we're tender. Again, I don't care what the temperature says. Brisket temperatures will vary from brisket to brisket. Therefore, if you're only going by a temperature, it could yield you some kind of inconsistent results. So I always go by tenderness. I use my probe if I have it with me, or I'll use a toothpick or whatever, and I'll just start testing this brisket. I'll poke around on the brisket and I'm just feeling for tenderness. If the tenderness is where I want it to be, then I know my brisket is ready to come off and we're ready to move on to the next part of this cook, and that is the rest. Hey guys, do me a favor. If you're finding some value in this content or you're at least entertained, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. It really does help to grow the channel and be able to do videos like this. And by the way, what kind of videos would you like to see on this channel? Put it in the comments down below. Let's make it happen. All right, back to the video. Now, just as all of the components of the cook we've done with the trimming and with the actual smoking and the actual cooking, the rest time is just as important when you're talking about a big cut of meat like a brisket. And so therefore, I like to give my brisket a good long rest time. I think it really does yield a better product, but hey, that's all subjective. You might not think so. You may think an hour is long enough. Whatever it is that you want to do, go for it. Again, as I said before, there's no rules to barbecue. You do what works for you. For me, I like a long rest, so therefore that's what we're gonna do. Besides, it was late when I pulled this brisket off, and I'm ready to go to bed, so we rested it overnight. So we let this brisket rest for a good 12 hours, and what we did was we put it into our oven. So I set my oven at 150 degrees Fahrenheit. After I rested this brisket down for about an hour and a half or so to get down to 160 degrees internal temperature. Now we put this brisket in and we let it rest for about 12 hours. That's a long rest time, but it worked out perfect for me, being it was overnight that we had this thing resting, and now we're ready to cut into some brisket. Okay, now after a 12-hour rest time, we got this brisket into the studio, guys, and it was time to slice it up. And this brisket was smelling fantastic. The bark was looking excellent on it. We had plenty of tallow that was contained in that foil boat for pouring right over the top of that brisket when we got ready to cut it. Now, again, why would we pour tallow over a brisket that we've worked so hard to get this bark set for? You don't have to. I just chose to do it. As I said, no rules, do what you want. So I poured some over top of it, but again, you can leave it crunchy and crispy and not pour it on. But we ended up pouring this tallow over top of it, and we sliced this brisket in half. Now, the thing that I noticed when I sliced into the brisket is the bark. The bark was definitely crispy over the top. Not like when you actually wrap it in foil or wrap it in butcher paper, where the bark is set and it looks great, but it may be just a little softer. than what you get with the foil boat. As I sliced through the brisket, I could actually feel and hear the crispiness of that bark as the serrated knife or my scallop knife was cutting through the brisket. But we got this brisket sliced in half. Man, the brisket looked phenomenal. It was very juicy, very tender. We had a good little smoke ring. Not that the smoke ring really dictates if you're gonna have a successful brisket or not, but it's just visually pleasing to see a good smoke ring, which we got with our Spider Grills Huntsman. Now we cut slices off of this brisket, and the thing that I noticed again was that our bark was still very much intact. It was not crumbling to flake apart, or the brisket didn't shred apart or break apart like you get sometimes with your softer bark. This one was nice and firm and was very pleasing as to when I was cutting it. Now, as I sliced through this brisket and took pieces off just to see just how well we cooked the brisket, I had to take a little bite, and man, I gotta tell you, it's very good. Nice and smoky, crunchy bark. It's doing a pretty good job there with this foil boat. Now we got some fantastic slices of point and flat to construct our sandwich. We got it onto a bun. We got our pickled onions and our jalapenos that we did earlier. We got those placed on, and we topped it with a little bit of barbecue sauce, because I mean, barbecue sauce on a brisket sandwich is awesome, right? So that's what we did. And man, I gotta tell you, biting into this sandwich and tasting this brisket sandwich, it was a very good mouthfeel with the brisket, with the bark. It had great smokiness, very much tender. All in all, I think it was just a fantastic tasting brisket. Now, the question remains, will the foil boat method blow your mind? Okay, for me, speaking strictly for me, it didn't really blow my mind. It was a fantastic switch up from having a fully wrapped brisket, whether again it was in foil or butcher paper, because now you've got a much crunchier or crispy bark with the foil boat method. So in that aspect, the foil boat method absolutely works and achieves that great crispiness that you may be looking for in your bark. Is it something for me that I will do every single time that I make a brisket? Probably not. But I will employ it from time to time, just because, like I said, it's a fantastic switch up. So hey, I am the Dawgfatha, and check out these other videos here, and I'll see you in the next one. I'm out. Peace.